Though I've been gardening most of my life, I've probably learned more about gardening in the few years I've had this channel than I did in the prior decade. One reason is that I do my best to present accurate information, and this requires at least some research and fact-checking for most videos. But despite my best efforts, I sometimes get things wrong, and when I do, you let me know about it. And in many cases, you've provided links to sources for me to further investigate. These challenges have not only expanded my knowledge, some of them have even changed the way I approach gardening. You've also shared solutions to common gardening problems that I've implemented in my garden with great success. Today I'll share 5 of the many things you've taught me about gardening. The first thing you taught me is that all of the cloves from a single bulb of garlic, when planted, will produce bulbs that are genetically identical. Not only that, all future generations originating from that first bulb will be identical. As a result, there's no adaptation over time to our local growing conditions. So contrary to what I said in an earlier video, when I plant generation after generation of garlic cloves originating from a single bulb, all of those bulbs will be clones of the original and will not gradually adapt to local growing conditions over time. For example, I wouldn't be able to develop a more cold-hardy strain of California softneck garlic using this method. This first came to my attention in a comment from viewer Ilatu, who very clearly explained the reasons why adaptation does not occur. After doing just a little bit more investigating, I was persuaded that Ilatu was right, and I thanked him for setting me straight. But because I'm a little obsessive, I also followed up with the Garden Professor's blog Facebook page, where I heard from a number of experts, including a retired geneticist, and they confirmed what Ilatu said in his comment. No genetic adaptation occurs in a single clonal strain, short of rare genetic mutations over a very long period of time. Though an individual clonal strain won't adapt to the growing conditions in my garden over time, the garlic population as a whole in my garden can adapt through selection, as long as I'm starting with a genetically diverse population. Specifically, assuming I have a number of genetically unique bulbs of a particular variety, when I save the largest, healthiest bulbs to plant in the future, I'm selecting the clones that produce the best in my garden and eliminating those that don't do as well. As a result, over time, I'll select a population of clonal strains that are better adapted to my growing conditions. The second thing you taught me helped me to get the only significant pest problem in my garden under control. You taught me that I could use packing tape to easily remove squash bug eggs before they even hatched. With no predators in the garden to control squash bugs, they used to wreak havoc on our squash plants. Fortunately, a viewer told me that you can use packing tape to easily remove their eggs from squash leaves before they hatch. Thanks to this tip, squash bugs are now only a minor nuisance in our garden. I just inspect the leaves once per week starting in early summer and remove the eggs when I find them. This has been one of the most helpful tips I've ever received from a viewer. Unfortunately, I can't find the original comment to thank them. The third thing you taught me is that it is possible to use too much compost. This revelation has saved me a lot of time and effort and has changed my approach to gardening. Before I alienate too many of my fellow organic gardeners, I want to clarify that I think compost is great stuff, and it's been responsible for much of the success in my garden. All I'm saying is that you can't have too much of a good thing, and it turns out in my case, I did have too much of a good thing. This possibility was first brought to my attention 2 years ago by AACT, who recommended soil testing before adding anything to the soil, and pointed out that too much compost can lead to nutrient surpluses that contribute to pollution and plant health issues. AACT also provided sources supporting these points. In response, I decided to test my soil in the spring and found that AACT was right. My soil had very high levels of organic matter and high or very high levels of most nutrients. Now, in hopes of bringing down nutrient levels, I make much less compost than in the past. I still compost organic matter generated on site, but I no longer compost free local resources like used coffee grounds, spent brewery grains, and horse manure, which means a lot less work for me. I'll test the soil again in the next couple years to see if nutrient levels have come down from their very high levels. If not, I'll make further adjustments. The fourth thing you taught me also changed my approach to gardening by eliminating a time-consuming weekly chore that probably wasn't adding any value. Specifically, you taught me that the use of actively aerated compost tea is not supported by peer-reviewed science. I've already discussed why I stopped using compost tea in a number of videos, so I won't repeat myself today. Instead, I just wanted to acknowledge that it was a comment from a viewer with links to sources that inspired me to further investigate the science, or lack thereof, supporting the use of actively aerated compost tea. Thanks to that comment, I'm now doing a lot less work in the garden without any evident downside. It's now been 3 years since I've used compost tea, and I haven't seen any difference at all in the garden. Finally, the fifth thing that you've taught me is that the flying insects that I've called cabbage moths all my life are actually cabbage butterflies. This bit of knowledge came to me through my Facebook page. I posted this picture of a cabbage white butterfly caught in a spider's web, but I identified it incorrectly as a cabbage moth. Ann Boyd was kind enough to point out that this is, in fact, a cabbage white butterfly, not a cabbage moth. Even though they are butterflies, their little green caterpillars eat our cabbage family crops, so I'm glad predators like spiders and wasps prevent them from doing too much damage in our garden. Before closing, I wanted to thank you for all of the things you've taught me, and to encourage you to continue to share your ideas and challenge me when you think I get something wrong. When you do, please include links to your sources so I can better understand the evidence supporting your position. I always include my sources in the description below. Being open to considering evidence that contradicts our current gardening practices will only make us more knowledgeable and more successful gardeners in the long run. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for more videos on how to grow a lot of food on a little land without spending much or working harder than you have to.